on-screen shots. He worked out every gesture and every action for the principals and his huge cast. Released early in 1915, the 50th anniversary of the end of the Civil War, The Birth of a Nation was 12 reels long, almost 3 hours, with a special score performed by a full symphony orchestra. It took its audiences by storm. It swept along with a cumulative force and power that present-day viewing of the film can only partially suggest. There simply had never been a picture like this before. President Woodrow Wilson described it like writing history in lightning. It aroused passions and tensions that lasted well beyond the theater. Race riots and mob action followed in the wake of its presentation in many cities. Aside from the immense controversy it created, The Birth of a Nation established once and for all that the film was an art in its own right, and Griffith was its master. Its use of black stereotypes and its sympathetic account of the rise of the Klan make this film difficult to watch today for its purely artistic value. Griffith was charged as a racist, despite his efforts to eliminate from his version the rabid hatred that seethes through Thomas Dixon's book. But Griffith was a Southerner, brought up in an embittered, impoverished household, hearing tales of the good old days before the war. He had even enlisted the aid of some Civil War veterans in making his exit. At age 39, he had reached the very pinnacle of his career, and with this film, he had made all his major contributions to the medium, transforming the film from a halting, stumbling imitation of theater into a vigorous, eloquent, independent art. Although there was still greatness ahead of him. Intolerance in 1916 with its 4 separate stories from 4 eras interlocked by a single unifying theme. And Broken Blossom in 1919. D.W. Griffith had made over 450 films in his career. At the height of his career, he declared, "The task I'm trying to achieve is above all to make you see." 2 other prominent producer-directors were working at the same time Griffith was, Mack Sennett and Thomas Ince. Each had his own studio and autonomy. Ince produced westerns and introduced top cowboy star William S. Hart. Ince kept his Culver City studios and ranch well stocked with cattle, horses, buffalo, and genuine Sioux Indians. He had a great talent for finding atmospheric locations for his tales of the American frontier. Thomas Ince also came to the movies from the theater as an actor. He began directing at Biograph in 1910. By 1914, he was a major force in the industry, introducing the concept of the creative producer to Hollywood. He set up the production unit headed by a production manager who would report directly to Ince. They worked on scripts and prepared shooting schedules. It was a system created for economic production, and in Ince's hands resulted in excellent pictures. This system, introduced between 1915 and 1920, was incorporated into every Hollywood studio for more than 3 decades in the era of large-scale mass production of films. On the opposite spectrum stood Mark "Mack" Sennett, king of the slapstick clowns. Sennett, a huge would-be opera singer, arrived at Biograph in 1909 and had already appeared in circuses, burlesque, vaudeville, and walk-ons in the theater. Like most actors of the period, he was lured into films less for the artistic potential than the $5 a day take-home pay. Sennett was possessed by a consuming passion. He wanted to play a comic policeman. He thought that cops were funny long before he got the opportunity to prove it. However, his boss, D.W Griffith, continued to cast him as a butler, rube, or tramp, never a comic cop. Sennett learned that Biograph was paying $25 for story ideas and began writing scripts. Soon he was learning to direct from the master himself, D.W Griffith, and became a director, getting a princely $65 a week. He worked hard at Biograph, turning out 2 pictures a week between 1910 and 1912. In 1912, he began making pictures in his own studio, the Keystone. Now at last he could indulge his fancy for comic policemen, and the Keystone Cops were born. Tumbling into his pictures in their outsized uniforms and collapsible tin lizards, he developed his core of characters and clowns. Among them was Fatty Arbuckle, Mabel Normand, Chester Conklin, Ben Turpin, Edgar Kennedy, Charlie Chase, and of course, Charlie Chaplin. Within the first year of operation, Keystone turned out over 140 comedies. Before long, Sennett, like Ince, was forced to withdraw from direct participation in his comedies and became a producer, presiding over his studio from a huge bathtub installed in his office, where he held staff conferences. Sennett had an uncanny instinct for timing and editing, and would be able to tell how to recut a scene to make it play better. He developed all the ideas for his comedies, and characters and characterizations were tailored to fit the personalities of the stars on his lot. Finished script would end in the gag room, where humorous scenes and situations were added. Shooting was a weird combination of script and improvisation. Thus, to liven up a faltering scene, it was Mabel Normand who shoved the first ever custard pie into the gloriously cockeyed features of Ben Turpin. Sennett considered himself as the average audience, and if he liked the scene, so would the public. He was rarely wrong. The success of this incessant flow of ordered insanity rested upon the antics of his gifted stars. By the late 20s, most of his top stars and directors left him for more lucrative feature film jobs. Sennett's name today is synonymous with slapstick and the custard pie, but he was a lot more than that. He used the camera to exploit the absurd, the impossible, the fantastic. He reduced the real world, or something resembling the real world, to a shambles and held it up to mockery and ridicule, where little men were married to stern, overpowering women, where lechery abounded, where officials were invariably inept, and a swift kick in the pants could settle everything. He developed a whole generation of top comedians and actors. He trained an entire school of directors who learned their craft of timing, physical movement, and editing at Max Sennett's Keystone Studios. One of them would become the world's biggest star, Charlie Chaplin, seen here with Max Sennett. These were the early years in the development of one of the greatest, most powerful, and liveliest of art forms, the movies.